Hi, in this video I'll be painting this Chinese dumpling with an afternoon tea. Let's dive right in. We're going to paint with a limited palette today. I have ivory black, pearl red, yellow ochre, titanium white, and I also added some cadmium yellow just for the brightest parts in the piece. Now, I already envisioned, it's a Chinese subject, it's tea with a dumpling, and the background I'm planning on making red because that's a lucky color for the Chinese communities. So let's get started. First, I'll focus on the whites because the main subjects are quite white. So I'll take some titanium white, but I don't want it too bright, so I'm also adding some yellow ochre so that we get a very warm white. And actually, this kind of already looks like the color which I might be able to use partly for my dumpling. Because it's very warm. So that will be the warmest white actually I'll have. Maybe just a little part also with some red in there, just a very tiny bit to show some perhaps meat or shrimp in that dumpling. Can be suggestive. And later on the go we can always add more of these mixtures to it. Now, this is pure titanium white. Again, I'm adding now just really a little bit of yellow ochre to it, just to get that coolness off. And for the shadow parts, I'm adding just a pinch of black as well to my mixtures. But I don't want it to be too cool. Ivory black is a bit of a bluish color. So I'm adding some red in there as well. Let's see what that does. Oh, maybe a bit too pinky, but we can always see what happens when we're at it. It's kind of a purple now. You see, I really make not a lot of paint because I'm planning on making the shadows very thinly on there. Now, for the tea, I'm taking some red, some black to make a darker red, basically a brown. And then I'm adding yellow ochre to that to get it a bit more in the middle. That might suffice. We'll just see. And for the dip, which is some vinegar within there, some slices of ginger actually. Taking some red and yellow ochre. That's a lot lighter, and without using white, because that will make it a bit milky, I'm adding some cadmium yellow there to spice it up. Now let's just start painting here. Starting with a flat brush, and let's start with this purplish shadow color. Need to start somewhere, right? Just very thinly putting the first colors on there, rubbing them out. Remember, I said I want to keep these shadows thin. That also creates an illusion of more depth. If you look at the old masters, also often you see that their shadows are actually very thin. And you often can see the background through it. And I feel this shadow in the bowl, cast by the chopsticks, really gives us a possibility to create a lot of 3D illusions there. But I'll go in there again with a smaller brush later on. Actually, let's mix also a bit of this brownish color because that might be a nice way to get started with shadows in that bowl. Again, very subtle, because it's a white bowl and there's not very strong shadows going on there. By rubbing it out, you can see you create a very soft approach. A bit of medium yellow with that purple, just to help with defining this shape a bit more. Now this reference picture actually I took when I was in a tea house in Shanghai. So you can have some nice dumplings there and enjoy some nice tea with it. I always like the flower teas, the chrysanthemum. Now these same colors actually we can use also for this little bowl here in the back. And there it gets a bit darker. And then some of the lighter whites. First I'm just, again, rubbing it on very lightly. Later on we'll load this brush with paint. And I'm keeping in mind the softer edges of this bowl. And then I like the contrast where you have this shadow, which is actually then quite sharp if you compare it to the other shapes we're seeing in the bowl. Now also by putting it on very thinly, you see that you still see the warmth of that undercolor shine through. And that undercolor was made by putting some burnt sienna acrylic paint very thinly on there. The shadow here is too dark, so I'm just blending it in a bit with some of the lighter values. And there I will really need a smaller brush later on. But now we're just thinking of the bigger shapes, the bigger picture. So also here we have the tea. It's a bit darker here. For now this color kind of suffices, but I think later on, if needed, we can always add another color to our palette. For example, burnt sienna, because it's a very nice warm brown. Towards the red side of the spectrum, but let's see later on. This orange color we can also mix in a bit here. You see, if you have a little basic palette on there already, before you start painting, it really opens up a lot of doors and possibilities for other mixes. And it gives you a little head start. And again there, if you do very thinly, you also get lighter parts. So there's no bright yellow here, no, it's just a thin wash over the background which let the background still shine through. Okay, now start here with the center a bit, which is more dark. And around there, there's a bit lighter. I think it's time also to get some color of the chopsticks in. Let's start with some black, also a tiny bit of red, to get that little purple glow over it. Now, let's start with the bigger parts here, because that might be easiest to do. I'm not too concerned about all the individual shapes at this point. Just blocking it. Seeing the bigger picture. And I think it's likely that these chopsticks will be the hardest part of the painting, because they have a very straight line. You can always put, of course, some painter's tape on there as well, if that would help you. I'm just gently following my line, which I drew in earlier with some pastel pencil. And also here, I'm doing it very thinly. And I'm just blocking this in as basically one big triangle shape. Just getting those rough lines in there. Now I'm really trying to rub off my brush to get it a bit more fresh. Get rid of those blacks. And see what happens when we add some red to the background, because I think that might be nice in this situation. Also keep in mind that on a reference picture we have this glass cup and you see the background through it, right? In this case we'll have to show a background of red. So you need to sometimes divert from what you see on your reference or in front of you if you want to manipulate that a bit. I do need a lot more red though, I see. And Pyrrole red is a slightly transparent red. So it also allows for nice mixing. And when you really want a red to really pop, then I would say maybe go for a cadmium red. And you get all these streaky strokes. Then you can just go over them again to make them go all in the right direction. It's a bit more easy on the eyes. Now here again, we're talking about glass, so I'm scumbling on there some red paint. I'm doing this thinner than on the background. I'm really pushing it out there. I really want it very lightly, but you also have the idea that you're looking through the glass. Further detailing will come later. I'm not worried about that now. Again, now we're just still blocking in the main colors, main shapes. Here, smoothing out a bit. Now here I have to be careful that I don't mix those reds with the black of the chopsticks, because then you get a bit of a brown muddy color. Like happens there on the little bowl right now. That's okay. Later on we'll load the brush with paint anyway and go over it again. And defining the edges I will do later. Now it's all blocking in. And why we do this block in over the whole piece is because it shows us the bigger picture, what we're working towards. And it helps us to relate the colors to one another and to see which colors we may or may not want to introduce as well. For example, the shadows under the balls, what color do we want those to be? Probably it will be a mixture of the red with black. But let's see later on. Not too worried with colors overlapping on the bowl. All things we can fix later on. Same here, not worried about those reds because those shadows anyway will be slightly reddish. I always like to work with a bigger brush as long as possible, because it forces me to think of the bigger shapes first. To not get lost in details too early on in the process. Now this is a very small panel I'm using for this. And that's why I also like to give this very red background, so it can drag somebody in. That they'll have a look when it's hanging in somebody's kitchen, for example, or dining room, or maybe in a hallway, or at the tea cabinet. It's allowed to pop because it's small. Just very gently making a connection there. What I'll do, I'll already put a little bit of red here. Later on I will go over that with darker paint, but then at least you see a little spot of light shine through, which you also see on the reference picture, kind of like that. Now let's have a mixture for these shadows. I want it to be predominantly red, but a darker red. Let's have a look if this is dark enough. If not, we just add black. That can be more black. Still with that red undertone though. It's also a nice balance with the chopsticks, I feel. And this is also where we need to think of defining the shape of this little bowl. Now this shadow kind of starts where these chopsticks also start coming in shadow-wise. Still very thinly. If you paint thinly, you can fix anything later on in the process. If you start thick, it's very difficult to do so. I'm going slightly over the edge with the red background. I think color-wise that works. Now here, this shadow will be more light. Because there's also some of that, not yellow, yeah, maybe yellow, but also a bit red. Maybe something like this, like a bit dark orangey color. Different materials cast different shadows. And then there it will get darker again. But I feel this brush is now getting quite big for what we're painting. I will only make a little start with that dumpling. Remember that little meaty part here. And some of the lighter values. It's almost the same color as the background actually. Again, still blocking in here. When I start detailing, then I'll grab my smaller brush for that. And I think that time has come now. This is a small filbert, so it has a very soft tip, synthetic. And now we can start loading the brush with paint and start detailing. I like to get these shadows here in as well, so let's start with those. As you can see, it's less streaky than that big brush. And it allows for easier control. Just softening it all now. And going over it again. just to define that a bit more. I don't want this edge too strong. It's boring. Now here we see that the shape of the ball where it meets the background is not really nice yet, so let's tweak that a bit. That's already better. There's more shadow over here. Also there we have that background actually shining through a bit, very thinly. Let's first making it red. And then going over with that shadow. As it's very small, I'm not going too detailed, but more suggestive. Let's continue with the shadows over here, just to make it the piece more complete as a whole. I like actually how these darker shapes can combine, can make like a connection with the chopsticks itself. That ties everything together, that dark spot there, I feel. Find this edge here also a bit more. Very gently. We're not in a rush. And actually, also if you want to paint loose, it's not about speed. With carefully thought out strokes. I feel that's a misunderstanding that quite some people have, that if you want to paint loose, that you should paint fast. That is not the case. Sorry for that. Let's continue a bit on the bowl. Here. take some more of this lighter value and make it more smooth. You should see the background coming in over the edge a bit now. You see, we're basically adding light bit by bit. We're building it up. And I'm not doing this with pure white, because if you look closely to the reference, you see also quite some very shiny highlights. And if you start really painting with pure white from the start, then it's very hard. Fill this edge here, or this shape here. It's not connecting properly yet. So adding a bit more red. It's a bit like if you're claying, we're working with clay. You're sculpting. Painting in a form is sculpting. Sometimes you add paint, sometimes you remove it. Just going over the edge without any paint on my brush now. Just to make that edge a bit more soft. And it also seems to be a bit shadowy then at that edge, which is good, because then we don't have to paint that specifically in there, because we can simply do it by going over these edges. Easy peasy. This shadow needs to be a bit more prominent, I feel. So I'm loading my brush in order to make it more dark. But the further you get from the bowl, the less dark I make it. It's not necessarily you see something in the reference, but I think it aids in connecting it with the background. And to give it also a more playful look. Some unwanted parts, again, you just go over it, just smoothing it out. Make it a bit vague. Wipe it onto the carpet. Whatever you'd like to do with it. Here also, this is a very dark part. Loading the brush, gently putting it on there. Might even put some pure black there later on. I don't know yet. Now let's focus a bit on this bowl again. Can add some more shadow vibes to define the form. Now the shadow on the bowl can be also a bit darker, so I'm taking a bit of this mixture, putting it with the shadow mixture we already had, and going over it again. And this is a crucial shadow to get that form right. And here we're claying again, right? Adding and removing paint. I'm also simplifying these shadows. And here we're adding some more light. Here's again one of those connections not really tidy. Just cleaning it up a bit. And here also defining those chopstick shadows a bit more on the table. Finding the edge of this tip as well. Let's work a bit on that dumpling, shall we? So we need to have some darker parts too. Maybe this yeah, that might do. Still very thin. We're working on shadows here, and I like to keep my shadows thin. But in general, I feel this dumpling can play a bit around with more thicker paints as well. Because of course the dumpling should be the star of the show. Needs to be darker. And I think this color works quite well, which we pre-mixed. So it's a matter of loading the brush, putting down the stroke, loading again, putting down the strokes again. So here we're building up the darks. Putting some random strokes as well in place. Not overdoing it with the textures because it's still a very soft subject. And when your textures are too strong, too dominant, then you lose that feeling that it's a soft subject. And I think it's important to know that I'm not going for an exact copy of the dumpling I see, but I'm rather using it as an inspiration source, creating something that looks like it could be a dumpling. By doing so, you really liberate yourself from getting too stuck on details, which simpler studies like this. Continuing with this bowl, so with the lighter whites, shadow, and then we can continue with the glass one. Taking a darker value from here, again it's that one we use for the background shadows. I always like painting glass. Really play with lights and darks, and it can get quite extreme at sometimes. Always a challenge to create the illusion of glass. Here's also a darker piece. have some of the darker tea as well. We need to darken this up. Needs to be more dark. Darker than that. Still have some of that color on my brush. We can dapple that here as well to give that effect as if the light is shining through that tea on the background shadow here. And I'm just gonna go with some reds over here just to blend it in a bit with that background. Here you see a bit distorted background. That's great, because glass often distorts what's behind it. And here we have a dark line, kind of indicating the bottom of that glass. I feel this brush I'm using now is just slightly too big for that. Just going over it again to soften it out. Adding some of the dark background color here as well to redefine my shapes. Adding some white here is an indication of that glass behind it, the bowl behind it, I mean. Let's get some more 3D-ness on these chopsticks, shall we? No. We have some lighter parts. And actually, maybe we can easily achieve that just by wiping it off. Well, that works. Just with a little paper tissue. Wiping off some paint. Not too much. Just a bit. Now I will get a very small brush to get really that dark shadow line in there. And here as well, it can be more dark. Also doing that with this small brush. Can control this one well. Still want to keep it simple, huh? So I'm not going to do all the details in these chopsticks. It would be too much for such a small piece. But at least to define the shapes a bit. And that illusion of light and 3D-ness. And contrast. Maybe redefine that shadow here we have also. There we go. No. I'm sticking with this brush now, because I'm going to further detail here. And with this smaller brush I can load paint in an orderly fashion, connecting the shapes a bit. And really tweak where I want to tweak. Still feel this is too light. Adding a bit of this to that. More red. Give it like a dark orange. That's better. Going back to my small brush. Further defining this dip. Actually, by letting that yellow undercolor show through a bit, you already get the illusion that there's something in there. And just add some more lighter values in there. Softening out here because I went over the edge again, which I did not really want to do there. I'm going to add some more titanium white here to my light mixture, just to lighten up parts where I want to have it more bright. taking some different color around the dumpling to make it stand out a bit more. Going back to my small brush, I want to add a little shadow line under that dumpling. Now we try that with this brown first. That will work. And I can use the same color to define some of these dumpling folds. I don't know how you would call it, but you know what I mean. But I don't want them too sharp, so going over them where I find them too sharp. Still that bit pinky part here as well. You know, I like this detailing because that's where you can make your loose marks a bit, you know. Let's now really make it pop. For example, the glass. Just taking some of those whites, the warm white first, to indicate the edge of the glass. You don't have to go over the whole rim, but just some indications here and there will do. Especially if you later on put highlights. Now I have pure white. But when I use a brush, it still kind of blends with the colors which are already on there. So I'm using this for my initial highlights. Here I also see a nice chance for a bit sharper rim, or a sharper shadow shape, so as you can see. Well, I do say sharp, but it's by no means a sharp edge. I feel the roundness here is not correct yet. Taking some more of that warmer white and gently going over there, following the shape. I'm just dotting on some highlights without rubbing them out. This here is too dominant. Just rubbing it out. Adding some pure cad yellow in the tea. Just add that touch of color. Some more of this color as well around it. And I think what's also nice is to go over that background with some more red and smoothen it out a bit. So I'm taking a bit softer brush. I'm just putting in some more red on that background, very softly, very gently. Also smoothing out the strokes. I feel this makes it pop a bit more. Need to be careful now with the parts we already detailed. Into my smaller brush for the harder to reach areas. So darkening it in the glass a bit. Otherwise there's too much of a difference. Smoothing out the edge a bit here. And taking my smallest brush with some red. There we go. Just some more highlights here. Some highlights on that chopstick, like that, slightly purplish white. Just at the end here. And here. There we go. Sign it with a toothpick. Thanks for watching.